Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. Coming to you from South Korea, I'm Yin Khvat. This is a gallery marking the 75th anniversary of the Korean War. Can a new liberal president mean greater opportunity for peace on the Korean Peninsula? I put that question to two South Korean experts. Joining us today are Professor Lee Jong-ho, Korea University Research Institute of Korean Studies Research Professor, and Kim Yong-lee, Seoul National University Institute of International Affairs Visiting Researcher Fellow. Very warm welcome to Taiwan Talks today.
Thanks.
Professor Lee, let me start with you. So North Korea fired around 10 rockets on June 19th. They landed in the Yellow or the West Sea. And this was a day after South Korea participated for the first time under Lee Jae-myung's presidency in joint air drills with the US and Japan. For you, was this a test of the new president, or was it simply a message to him?
I think it definitely was a test. And it is not new that North Korea has always tested this kind of stuff to make sure that they have an idea of how South Korea respond to this kind of crisis. They're closely watching whether South Korea is convening the NSC well, properly, etc., looking at the decision-making processes. By doing that, they are testing the alliance coordinations. So right now, the Lee Jae-myung administration has just came to office, and in the US, we have US President Donald Trump. They're looking for the whether the alliance is actually functioning properly.
Right. And what do you think that they found out through this test?
Well, it's unknown what they actually have thought about this, but I believe that this kind of missile test will definitely happen in the future as well. Not necessarily they want to attack South Korea, but to test whether the alliance coordination is in the right place.
Okay. Professor Kim, what do you think of the calibration of the response? Because it was rockets as opposed to cruise missiles, which it has been in the past.
I guess it's just their main purpose is to send a message, and then because South Korea have a new president a few weeks ago, so perhaps it could be a message to the new president of South Korea. Yes.
Professor Kim, so and does this highlight, the predicament that the new president finds himself in? He wants to, assuming that he wants to balance friendlier relations with North Korea, but he still needs to keep on the US security alliance.
Whether you belong to liberal government or whether you belong to conservative government, the ultimate goal of South Korea's diplomatic policies and foreign policies are reunification, and that is constitutional value. So you may see South Korea responding with more hardline policy when it comes to conservative governments, etc. When the liberal government, they tend to engage more with North Korea. But at the end of the day, it is our constitutional value to achieve reunification through peace. So what Lee government is trying to do, I believe, is of course it wants to re-engage with North Korea, talking with North Korea so that they open up a space for dialogue. So as you already know that he already halted the loudspeaker broadcasting to North Korea. I think it has a very clear message. He wants to prioritize managing the inter-Korean relations so that making sure that there's no unwanted conflict in the Korean Peninsula. And B, he wants to also open the door even slightly to dialogue, making sure that there is a room for diplomacy. And of course, the rationale behind this too, to make sure that there is eventually reunification.
So on North Korea's side, though, does he need to go further? If he wants to reduce conflict, does he need to stop the drills? This is part of the strategy of so-called dual suspension, which is North Korea stops its missile nuclear tests, and secondly, the US and South Korea stop their drills.
Well, we don't know his strategy yet, but my guess would be because Donald Trump is also not a it appears that Donald Trump is not a big fan of U.S. South Korea drills too. So it is possible that that could be played as a diplomatic card. But after what we have experienced during the Moon's time in office, I don't think halting a bilateral exercise would be a big thing from South Korea and US's perspective too. Back then, during the Moon's time in office, that was possible because of the COVID factor, right? But right now we don't have that. Also, we have already experienced that didn't really work out well. And also, Kim Jong-un, during his summit with Moon Jae-in during 2018 and 2018, Kim Jong-un himself said he acknowledges the importance of the US and RK alliance's military drills too. So yes, they could use that as a diplomatic card to open the room for the diplomacy to maneuver, but I don't think it could be a big dramatic step that can be taken overnight, that can be perceived from Pyongyang's viewpoint to be considered as something big gift from South Korea.
So you actually don't believe in this dual suspension strategy anyway, because you're saying it's not enough to stop North Korea with its nuclear capability.
I definitely do think what North Korea would think right now is they would want more from South Korea and the US.
Okay, Professor Kim, what is more? What is the more that North Korea wants from South Korea?
Well, I have slightly different viewpoints about that because North Korea has been successfully fulfilling their material demands. For example, the petroleum cutting-edge weapons and some advanced technology from Russia because of recent Russo-North Korean quasi-alliance relationship at the expense of North Korean troops' participation in the Ukraine war. So I don't think Kim Jong-un have many things wants to get from the South Korea at this moment, only except for South Korea provide a kind of bridge between United States and North Korea. But
what do you think North Korea wants from the US?
Bilateral dialogue between North Korea and the United States has been the only thing Kim Jong-un wants to get since he ascended the throne. So
that's interesting, isn't it? Because we know that recently Donald Trump has sent the letter, I think, through the embassy in Washington. This letter had been refused by the officials there. And we heard that Kim Jong-un had said that he had been humiliated by the previous attempts at negotiations, and he felt that it was only mere sort of personal theater for Donald Trump. What's your assessment on those moves then? Is he playing hard to get? What's the strategy there? If he ultimately wants dialogue, which is what you say.
Like many other countries' leader, Kim Jong-un is now struggling, predicting how Donald Trump is going on. So I don't think North Korea is, at this moment, have a clear strategy how to deal with the United States. Maybe they now sit and watching the Donald Trump's every steps.
Right. And Professor Lee, what do you believe that North Korea wants essentially from the US?
I just wanted to elaborate on this point very quickly. In December 2023, Kim Jong-un made an official declaration saying that he's going to completely forfeit the Korean Peninsula reunification. Now, this is a very risky move from internal perspective because Kim Jong-un regime has actually built its legitimacy to rule the country through the through the vow that he will realize the ideology of Juche across the peninsula, meaning that he legitimized his ruling legitimacy by promising to his people that he will deliver unification. But he said, hey, I'm not going to seek for reunification anymore.
And he also designated the South as a hostile state,
Yes, exactly.
enemy. Mhm. It seems that Trump has essentially called North Korea a nuclear state, that for the first time ever. So he seems to have acknowledged that, which is surely something that's big. There's also been the report, although the Pentagon denied it, of 4,500 troops being withdrawn from South Korea, moved to perhaps Guam. Do you see any of those, Professor, as being concessions to North Korea?
Right. That's by calling North Korea as a nuclear state is not a good thing because from South Korea's perspective, North Korea's nuclear threat is posing us an existential threat. So from South Korea's perspective, we consider it as a very dangerous move.
Almost a betrayal?
Oh yes, it would be considered as a betrayal. Also, at the same time, we heavily rely on the U.S. ROK-U.S. alliance for our security because of the fact that we don't have nuclear weapons. What we need to do is we need to get more through the negotiation from the U.S. Whether that be a greater version of extended deterrence or whether that be an increased potential nuclear capabilities, etc. Potential nuclear capabilities, etc.
So you're saying more nuclear capability in terms of South Korea's own, or simply those weapons being placed on South Korean?
There could be various options. We could redeploy the U.S.'s tactical nuclear weapons in South Korea, which was stationed in South Korea up until 1990s. Or we could also through the treaty with the U.S., we are banned from having the uranium enrichment program, etc. Maybe U.S. can open up that a little bit to South Korea. Officially, South Korea and U.S. have been calling the alliance as global partnership and global alliance, which means that the alliance can actually act towards regional crisis, not just within the Korean Peninsula. So from South Korea's perspective, that actually means South Korea doing more for the regional security. From U.S. troops' perspective, it means that U.S. troops stationed in Korea can be deployed to other parts of the world to conflicts outside of the Korean Peninsula. Now that means U.S. troops can be deployed to other regional crises, such as should there be a crisis in Taiwan Strait or East China Sea or even South China Sea. So as South Korea also aims to do more for the regional security, and as U.S. troops also do more for the regional security, I think South Korea can use that to get more to strengthen our own nuclear capabilities.
Professor Kim, we talked about former President Moon Jae-in, and he played obviously a fundamental role in setting up the 2018 summits between Trump and Kim Jong-un. Do you think that Lee Jae-myung could play that role?
There are some concern amongst the experts about the new government's North Korea policy because President Lee Jae-myung recently appointed Mr. Lee Jong-seok as head of the National Intelligence Service and Mr. Jung Dong-young as a Minister of Unification. And as you know, Mr. Lee Jong-seok gave birth to the previous liberal governments, for example, Roh Moo-hyun governments, appeasement North Korean policy, and Mr. Jung Dong-young was a great supporter of that kind of policy. So, as every South Korean now know, that kind of policy results in the North Korean dozens of nuclear bombs. So, perhaps President Lee Jae-myung's policy line might rely on Mr. Lee Jong-seok and Mr. Jung Dong-young.
When we say that it's an appeasement policy, can you tell me exactly what we mean by that?
Oh yeah, of course, from the South Korean perspective, the kinds of the appeasement policy means, for example, President Lee Jae-myung recently try to halt to sending of flyers to the North Korea and stop the loudspeaker broadcasting towards North Korea first, while North Korea still never neutralized their reciprocal weapon, such as a bunch of artillery units near Seoul. So I think this kind of policy can be counted as a appeasement policy.
Right. So you see that as being lopsided, not both sides de-escalating in a similar way. Professor Lee, we see that Sergei Shoigu was very recently in Pyongyang. It was the second time in June, in the month of June. Now obviously, we can also see that for North Korea, the relationship with Russia is very much about building up its nuclear technology, missile technology. So exactly how valuable then does that make Russia to North Korea? And is there in any scenario anything ever that the US could offer that could compete with that?
So I think the relationship between North Korea and Russia is significant in two ways. I think the transfer of conventional technology, such as how to use drone in wars, etc., that could be seen as a game changer in this region, because right now how they actually operate in war is completely different. That could be a game changers for them. Another thing is the benefit that they can enjoy would be economy. By strengthening relationship with Russia, you can get more from Russia in terms of economy, because Russia doesn't really care about the international sanctions imposed to Moscow anymore. So from North Korea's perspective, that's it's a win-win scenario for both Pyongyang and Moscow. So I think it all comes down to how should we deal with this, correct? So I just wanted to elaborate what happened in Germany when Germany was divided. As I said earlier, North Korea has said it's going to completely forfeit reunification with South Korea. Just like that, East Germany during 1960s, East Germany said exactly the same thing. We don't share the same German identity. We're a completely different state. We're a hostile state against West Germany, etc. And they did their own thing in terms of military buildups, etc. How West Germany reacted to that is that although they also carefully check and balanced from a military perspective, what they did was they did not stop the engagement policy towards the East Germany, so which actually laid the foundation for them to actually achieve reunification. So I think Lee government is trying to do that. I believe what Lee government is trying to do that. While North Korea has definitely closed the door, I don't think Lee is unlikely to give up the long-term goal of reunification, not because he's from liberal camp, but because that is our constitutional value.
So reunification is the goal. Is it built on sort of family bonds that essentially, the two Koreans are part of the same family bloodline, it's the same entity? Is it also a belief that reunification can lead to denuclearization and peace?
Well, I think I have a slightly negative viewpoint about that kinds of a family bond kinds of things, because as Professor Lee mentioned before, Kim Jong-un officially defied the concept of unification with South Korea, and even he refused to define South Korea as a same nation. So, of course, even though our constitutional law imposing an aim on the president to pursue a peaceful and liberal democratic unification with North Korea, I would suggest perhaps it's the time to reconsider our fundamental principle of the reunification policy or unification itself. Yes, because I think the inter-Korean relations is can be depicted like a relationship between man and woman because we share the same bloodline. So in the relationship between man and woman, if one side clearly announced, I don't like you, please never visit me or send a message to me again. So the reason why I contended we need to adjust our reunification policy is that because the other side, Kim Jong-un, at least at this moment, Kim Jong-un doesn't like to put his efforts to make some détente with South Korea or make our inter-Korean relations move forward. So I think, yes, even if Lee Jae-myung governments try to get North Korea's attention, but I guess, yes, there's very little thing Lee Jae-myung governments can get from that effort.
So you believe that South Korea should refocus essentially on the things that will help its defense, build up deterrence? Yeah, okay. Professor Kim, so there was a warship, a destroyer, that sank on its launch, and that particular warship has now been repaired. North Korea says that they will be building another 2, so they're 5,000-ton destroyers, and this is all part of their naval build-up, modernization. There's also been reports that this is essentially to ally with China and Russia in terms of in the seas in North Asia. What impact would this have on regional security?
So about the Kim Jong-un's obsession to develop its naval capability, I think what Kim Jong-un wants to do is he wants to develop a full set of deterrence capability. And he wants to have, what I mean by full set is he wants to have ICBM. He also wants to have SLBM, making sure that he has the full set so he has the credible...
nuclear triad.
Exactly,
yeah.
The second strike capability. Now, also another reason that Kim Jong-un is actually spending so much money and so much effort into his naval capability development is that because North Korea's Navy is significantly disadvantaged when it comes to, when compared to South Korea. North Korea's sea is divided. South Korea's sea is all linked together. So what you actually deployed in the West Sea can also go to East Sea, etc. But North Korea's sea is divided. So exactly. So what he really need to increase the naval capabilities, including especially the submarine capabilities, etc., to overcome that disadvantage. So that's why I think North Korea is actually spending a lot of money and effort in terms of its naval capability as well.
As a final question, Professor Lee, actually I think we've heard the view of Professor Kim. Professor Kim has concerns about appeasement when it comes to Lee Jae-myung's policy towards North Korea. What do you think? Do you think Lee Jae-myung represents that risk for South Korea, or does he actually offer better hopes for peace on the peninsula?
So I think what Lee is trying to do at this stage is not basically proposing a grand, let's reconciliation into Korean policy at this stage. We mentioned briefly about the loudspeaker earlier. So what Lee is trying to do right now, I believe, is that he is just communicating to North Korea, hey, let's try to avoid the provocation, and let's see how if we could stabilize the relations first. And thankfully, North Korea, to a degree, responded to that by also altering their versions of loudspeakers to South Korea. So I don't think that's a major development in the inter-Korean relations, but it could be a small step. So as I said earlier, reunification does not require, it's not something that can be achieved overnight. But what we can do practically is that while we focus on deterrence and etc., but also focus on engagement policy so that we can manage the inter-Korean relations so that it doesn't escalate to a level that is uncontrollable. Because the inter-Korean conflict isn't just about conflicts in Korean Peninsula anymore. It's also related to the security of Taiwan, because if North Korea's provocation continues to happen, that means the U.S. troops in South Korea will be trapped in this region. If that happens, there could be an impact should there be a security crisis in Taiwan Strait or South China Sea or East China Sea, etc. So it's all linked together. So what we can do practically at this stage is to manage the inter-Korean relations so we don't have any unwanted conflict in the region, so that there's a room for South Korea to do more in terms of regional security.
We're going to have to wrap it up there. We've run out of time. Thank you both so much, Lee Jong-ho and Kim Jong-il, for joining Taiwan Talks today.